All right, back again. This is Jordan French. I'm here with Serguei Beloussov, known as, in some circles, the Bill Gates of Singapore. Goes by many names. Sergey, thanks for joining us.
Yes, thank you. But I don't like to be known as a Bill Gates of anything. I prefer to be known as myself.
Great, I can appreciate that. I'm glad you.
Even though I really think Bill Gates is an amazing guy, it's still I'm not him.
Let's talk about that. You had a chance to meet him. I know. You spent some time with him.
Very little time. In 1996, we in Singapore started writing the first software application, which we sort of invented. It was a financial derivatives evaluation package. We used the latest Microsoft technologies. At that time, Microsoft was becoming a server company. So they shipped Windows NT in the early 90s, but then they shipped Windows 2000, the year 2000. And in 96, they were sort of in transition. They added to NT 4.0 some new features, which are typical features of advanced server software, such as transaction monitor, message queue, some sort of a framework for building component applications. So at that time it was called DCOM and COM. And so we used all of those technologies and we built this application. Application itself was quite advanced, but perhaps it's an undefined market for it. So what it allowed to do is to do a visual modeling of financial derivatives for non-mathematicians. Mm-hmm. So they can actually build a financial derivative and evaluate its price, at which price you should sell it in such ways that it would be profitable. But it was very advanced, and so when Bill Gates came to Singapore, Microsoft have introduced us to Bill Gates. And Bill Gates told us we have a great architecture, and that made us feel very special. And from that point onward, we decided that we want to build software.
That's a great quote. So one thing we'll do for the audience is we'll back up a bit. For those who don't know Serguei Beloussov that well, he's a Singapore citizen, started out in the transition period that he mentioned in the mid-90s, and is now a co-founder and CEO of Acronis Foundation as well, among other things we'll get into in this interview. Sergey, Singapore itself was also in a transition in the mid-90s, and from what I've been told, you're a big part of that evolution of its place in the build-out of technology globally. Tell us about that experience when you arrived in Singapore, what that whole scene was like for you.
You know, I wasn't very thoughtful at that time. I was just quite young. When I came to Singapore, I was 22 years old. And so you're not super thoughtful when you're 22, especially when you're born in Soviet Union. And Soviet Union was a country where business was perceived to be a criminal activity, right? And so people who would try to do business in Soviet Union would go to jail, right? And so you had a very little understanding of how to do business, and I was mostly consumed with my first business, and my first business was about building computers. And so Singapore was used as a base to source components from Asia and as a base to source financial support to be able to buy those components, ship them to, at that time, Russia and assemble computers. So I don't know, I think in 1996 when we accidentally decided to build our own software, Cassandra, as a sort of a side project, it was quite helpful that Singapore had a program which was a joint program between National Computer Board of Singapore, sort of like Ministry of IT, and Microsoft. And this program was helping companies, was providing grants, was offering sort of money to companies who would build some advanced applications. Mm-hmm. And so when we started doing whatever we started doing, Microsoft noticed us, invited us to this program, and we have actually then made an application, and we get some financial support. The support was not so huge, but it made us write a business plan. It made us think about how we're going to go to market. It made us connected closer to Microsoft, so it was helpful. Again, I don't think at that time I've thought much about the scene in Singapore or anything like that. Also, I never really was fully in one place. Back in 1994, we also opened office in San Francisco, and so I was always between San Francisco, Singapore, and we also had, we had significant presence in Switzerland. We always used Swiss banks for global operations. So I was coming here very often. So I was always traveling.
So up until that point in '96, you were more so on the hardware end, though. Is that right?
That is right, but it's very easy for media in general to think about me as a person, but I'm not really a person. I represent the team. Mm-hmm. So there is a group of people who are actually working together with me. Mm-hmm. Some of them working together with me since 1992, and they are all graduates of Moscow State University, Moscow Institute of Physics and Technology, and they are all graduated with a degree in physics, a degree in applied mathematics, or degree in software or engineering, or degree in computer science, or degree in cybernetics. And practically in any research which you do today, in modern science, you need software. So most of the time when you do research, you're doing something new. And so for that research, you need to write new software. And so all of us were trained to write software. And so whenever we did hardware businesses, for example, the first business was computer assembly business, but we wrote our own automation program. And the second business is consumer electronic business. And consumer electronic business, we did manufacturing. That means we had a lot of different manufacturing equipment which we needed to make operational. So we wrote software for those manufacturing equipment, for plastic molds and for production lines. And so there was always software engineers involved.
Yeah, and thanks for correcting me on the plural you. You've had a core team now for 25 years, right? So you must be doing something right.
Yeah, we have a team. Some of the people joined me in July 1992. Mm-hmm. I mean, like our CTO. I'm not sure whether you should be proud of it. It's a good team. It's always better to have new people than old people, but we have. We still have in this company two people who were hired in July 1992.
Yeah, so
three people.
Yeah, so and I see that consistently with entrepreneurs. Oftentimes they're able to put a team together and build multiple companies. But let's go back to Cassandra. That was a pivotal time, mm-hmm. because it was your move almost accidentally, or from that grant into software.
Yeah, it was a bunch of things which came together. So mm-hmm. First of all, I always kept close with my classmates from my university, and classmates from my university, they either went to business or they went to work abroad in science. And so I have at the moment classmates in most of top universities in the world: Caltech, MIT, Stanford, Harvard, Carnegie Mellon, Oxford, Cambridge. And so I kept in touch with specifically people in Stanford. One of them is currently professor in Harvard, Eugene Demler. And so he told me a couple of stories about successful professors who would leave and do business. Most of his stories were about how beneath the professors' values to go and do business, and how these professors would make hundreds of millions, buy Ferraris, come back to be professors, but would not be accepted by other professors because they drive Ferraris. And
they were
sellouts. How much better is to just focus on pure science and drive Toyota Celica or Toyota Camry versus driving a Ferrari, and how those poor, unhappy professors would then have to go and build another business and milk more hundreds of millions of dollars instead of being a real scientist like my friend. And so I sort of listened to two stories. One story was about a professor who built a computer security company, Another story was a professor who evaluated financial securities, and I decided to build a software for financial securities, which was Cassandra, which was sort of a funny combination of these two stories.
Yeah.
And that's one coincidence. Then another coincidence, in fact, I was able to find people who understand financial mathematics. I mean, I have good understanding of mathematics, but financial mathematics is quite specific, and there is a lot of different results in this area. So we found some people in University of Illinois and in Stanford University, and so we started writing the software, and it was looking interesting enough. And at that time, it was still a very very sort of interesting field in terms of like there was a lot of people contemplating doing financial derivatives and making tons of money over them. And so when we started doing it, that was a coincidence that Microsoft noticed us. Also, they noticed that for some funny reason. So our head of engineering, Stanislav, at that time he was already working for us in Moscow office. I didn't realize that he was there, and I thought I should write the software, and then I started looking for somebody to write it. And our CTO, who works with me for 26 years, Oleg Melikov, said like, "Oh, I have this guy Stanislav. He's good in writing software. You should talk to him." So I talked to him on the phone. I was in Singapore, and I tell him, "Stanislav, do you want to write the software?" And he's like, "Yeah, okay, but if we use the latest Microsoft application, I use Visual Basic for applications because I want to use Visual Basic for applications, which is now available to license." Started to explain me something. I didn't understand software too much at that time. And then we were second company in the world which licensed Visual Basic for applications. Visual Basic for applications, what is used if you use Excel and write pivot tables. And so Microsoft initially had it as a part of Microsoft Office. Right around 96, they started licensing it separately. At that time, there was multiple companies who will create scripting languages and license scripting languages. But here he was able to license it from Microsoft, and it was complete Visual Basic, and it was nice. And so because we actually was second company in the world, that's the only reason Microsoft noticed us. So they noticed us, and then they talked to us, and then, as a coincidence, there was this grant program. And so then, as a coincidence, there was a visit of Bill Gates to Singapore. Bill Gates came to Singapore multiple times, 2 times. So one time he came in 97, and there was something to show.
And that's when you met.
Yeah, that's when we met. But I mean, and met is a very strong word. We met. He spent maybe 20 minutes with us.
Right. Understood. So thanks
and he gave a quote for our press release.
That's the key, and we can quote him again here too from what you said earlier, Sergei. You're best known now as co-founder and CEO of Acronis, but between following Cassandra, you did a number of things leading up to Acronis, and these a lot of people see as building blocks to what you're doing today.
Possible. Yeah, no, I mean, what we did is quite simple. So first thing after we thought of ourselves as a great software engineers, and at the same time we were also a franchising distributor of a financial software, ERP software called Solomon Software. And because we thought we are the coolest in the world, we started convincing this, at that time, 15-year-old established mid-size software company from Findlay, Ohio, that they have wrong architecture. And we obviously shown a quote from Bill Gates who says that we have a right architecture. And there was a coincidence inside Solomon Software. They decided to move to a new architecture for some future product, but the old architecture product was given to a guy who decided that he wants to still refurbish it, and so he hired us to do it. And so we built, because we were experts in architecture, which we were not, but we thought we are. And so we basically brought and built maybe 50-60 people engineering office in Singapore. Very quickly we went to not just Solomon Software, but we went to another company not known well today, Pervasive Software, still a public listed company. We also convinced them that they have their own database management system. One person you might have seen on this event is Monty. Monty is the founder of MySQL, and then subsequently founder of MariaDB. MySQL is part of everything, right?
Massive.
Yeah. So Monty wrote 70% of MySQL code. I mean, the guy, his assistant and actually childhood friend who had a blue hair. If you've seen a lady with red hair.
We made a nice picture together.
Yeah, but there was a lady with blue hair. She's Swedish and he is Swedish as well, but from Finland. And so Pervasive Software was MySQL before MySQL existed. So Pervasive Software should have been MySQL, but MySQL won eventually. But at that time it was equally popular. We convinced them, and then we convinced a bunch of companies. And so we ended up with 60, 70 people office in Singapore building software. This was 97, 98, 99. We built software for Solomon, we sold software in Asia, we built software for Pervasive, we built software for B operating system, we built software for some company called HAL computer system. HAL is IBM, one letter later IH, B, one letter before, HF, A, B, M, L, LM, right? So HAL is, there is a movie about HAL computer. And so company was founded to build the next generation Spark architecture, and they needed some rewrites of the operating system. So we had a bunch of engineers. And then around 1999, even though the bubble didn't burst yet, it was clear that it's coming because a lot of companies started doing crazy things. And so our partners, Pervasive Software specifically, and Solomon Software started doing crazy acquisitions. They bought a bunch of internet companies, and so they would have a very profitable real business, but in order to look sexier, they would buy something, internet something. And so they started sort of running out of money because even though they tried to become .com, they wouldn't have really .com in their DNA. And so mostly they just wasted money. And so it was clear for us that we need to do something else in 1999 because we couldn't really sustain the business of working with these guys. It was kind of outsourcing, but it wasn't really outsourcing because in our case, I came up with ideas what Pervasive and Solomon needed to build. So we sold them the ideas and they would pay us compensation for our service, and they will pay us license fee if the idea was successful as a product. And so that's led us to the need of founding something which would build a unique technology, which was Parallels, right? And so we founded Parallels in the beginning of 2000. And initially what we wanted to build is a complete platform for application service providers, which includes storage, network, and compute, includes automation, and includes basically virtualization of storage, network, and compute. It was a very big vision. We were a small team of people, 70 people in Singapore, with very limited amount of money. And so very quickly we realized that we cannot do all of it. And so we split Acronis in 2003 from Parallels.
And the reason was resource constraints.
Reason was just resource constraints. The reason was that we needed to focus, and so Parallels is focused on virtualization automation and primarily virtualization automation of compute, and Acronis focused on specific one application, one storage application, which was backup for many years.
Right. It turns out that Acronis has grown to a much larger company, correct?
No. Parallels was larger in 2015. When we started selling it. So Parallels was split into 4 companies. 2 companies were sold, Plesk. Also the key people of Plesk were here in the audience. I'm still a shareholder, minority shareholder in Plesk. And then Odin was sold to Ingram. And then
Ingram Micro.
Ingram Micro,
right.
Yes. And then there is still 2 pieces, Parallels, desktop business and remote application business, and also Virtuoso. There's still 2 parts which are still there, but at some point Parallels was about 1,250 people and was over $200 million in revenue, and it was bigger than Acronis. At that point, for sure, bigger than Acronis. It's about the same size now.
So did you foresee the kind of 4-way split from Parallels with the derivative companies?
I ran Parallels from 2000 to 2010. 2010, we hired a professional CEO, and I focused on Runa Capital. And it's a complicated topic. It's very easy to discuss things in a sort of past tense.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very easy to either pretend that you foresee or you pretend that you could have done better. It's much more complicated to do things in the future and right now. But no, I did not foresee. But at the end of the day, any business has always a challenge of fighting completeness versus simplicity. So you want to make something complete, but you also want it to be not too complex. So complexity and completeness are sort of two different things, and arguably this split of Parallels to four businesses made this four less complete businesses, but their work becoming much simpler, and so they're easier to run.
So one piece of advice you might have is always think about simplifying a business. And if
I don't know if it's a good piece of advice. I think it's important that you have a strategy, and it's important that you have a plan. And I think when you have a strategy, you should always think that the strategy is a simple thing. So strategy is something which you can execute well. So you have execution capacity for your strategy. For example, if I will try to become a ballet dancer, I cannot execute it well anymore, because if you want to become a professional ballet dancer, you need to start when you're 4 years old. And so that's not going to be a very good strategy. Even in case I will have a very special training program, I cannot really execute it, right? The strategy also means that you have to do something different. Strategy also means that you have to leverage your strengths. And the strategy also means that you have to not do something. You have to be able to do something, but not do that to focus. So this is just four things. And then once you have a strategy, you need to have a plan. It's hard to have a plan because it's much easier to operate without a plan, because when you build a new business especially, there is a lot of uncertainty, and so it's very difficult to figure out what the plan should be. But nevertheless, you have to have a plan, and eventually you can adjust your plan, right? And so that's what you need to do. Obviously, doing things which are simple is a good idea, but one thing which I want to definitely say is that when you go and read books about how to build businesses, most of them are written by people who never built businesses. Most of those books, they recommend to focus, and they recommend to have simplicity. And it's important to understand that building a new business, building even a medium-sized business like Acronis, is inherently a hard thing to do, and so you cannot do it too simple. It's if you do something which looks very easy, probably you're doing something wrong.
Fair point to make. It sounds like strategy, though, and planning led to the installation of the professional CEO at Legacy Parallels. Is that right? What were the decisions?
No, it wasn't Legacy Parallels. No, it's yes, it did. We wanted to go public. Or sell the company, and it's hard to sell the company with a founder, because who would buy the company? If you cannot hold the company together without a founder. So
you're referring to key man risk?
Yeah. No, it's not key man risk. I'm referring to the fact that if I own the company, somebody buys the company, I get a lot of money, I get much less motivation and much less autonomy, right? So people are motivated by mastery, autonomy, and purpose. And a lot of entrepreneurs are motivated by autonomy, by the fact that you can control things. You do it yourself. When you sell a business, you cannot control things. In fact, what you can control is your money, and so you can go take your money and do something else. And so it's a natural thing. Every entrepreneur, if he wants to prepare his business for a strategic transaction, would probably benefit from a professional management.
Right. Okay. That's a great set of points. Ultimately,
But I mean, I'm not sure it
Yeah.
was a good idea or bad idea. It happened. It's probably in retrospect, it wasn't such a great idea. But again, that's just a set of circumstances of what happened thereafter.
and it presented some other opportunities for you. And one of the things that you did was take the helm of Acronis.
For example, at that time to build a Runa Capital and QF Capital and Fistech Ventures.
So not a lot of people know about Runa Capital. Runa Capital is essentially a early stage venture capital
It's a growth
firm.
stage venture firm. It's basically actually sort of a family of venture funds with slightly different limited partners with slightly different focus. So one fund is focused on any technology, including hardware, including science, like quantum technology. One fund is related to very early stage and seed stage, and one fund is growth stage. But altogether about $500 million under management, and probably close to 100 companies in the portfolio.
Yeah, so pretty big and in that space, and helps for this audience. Runa Capital certainly helps companies that need funding to grow their business.
Well, venture funds don't help companies. Venture funds are focused on making money for their shareholders. But also in the process of doing it, if it if it's aligned with the goal of the funds, they could help companies.
Incidental benefits.
Yeah.
I appreciate the cynicism of investing in some cases. Since you took over Acronis, it's grown a lot. Its kind of footprint in the world has grown very much too. One thing I want to touch on is one angle through which a lot of people now do know Acronis, and that's through motorsports. Sergei, tell us about that. Was there a deliberate move to go down a road of marketing into that industry? Motorsports industry.
It's a very common topic. We have always a very simple answer. So we have, first of all, a very complete and very efficient product suite. And because it's very efficient, it's especially useful in cases where businesses are suddenly experiencing explosion of data. And so sports are such industry. Sports is a $90 billion industry, and I'm not talking about motorsports. And today, sports are experiencing explosion of data because all of a sudden they have computer vision, artificial intelligence. They need to manage their fan communities, and they have multimedia data about fan communities. They can analyze and deal with this data. So every sport, and you will see more announcements from us coming out next week, the week after, and so on and so forth, have explosion of data. And this explosion is new. That means that they don't have actually IT budget for that. They did not realize that suddenly to win, let's say in baseball, you need data, or to win in basketball, you need data, to win in hockey, you need to deal with data. Also to manage your fan community, you need data. And so here we go, we come with our software, it's very efficient, and what we do, we provide our software, in return we get a marketing value. Now with motorsports, especially with Formula One, explosion of data is sort of outrageous. So if you go into a large bank, let's say UBS here, UBS will have several petabytes of data. The motorsports team will have 10 to 20 petabytes of data because of the way they work, because most of the data is generated by engineers who are constantly redesigning the car, and they have no time to test it in real life, so they test it in a virtual sort of simulators, and they test it in a virtual aerodynamics tubes, and so they have a lot of data. Engineers generate in a single team 3 to 10 terabytes of data per day, hence maybe up to 4-5 petabytes per year, and they keep data for many years, and the amount of data is growing. Also, the car has telemetry on the car, so there's a lot of data. That's why we give software and get marketing value. Now, for us, it's even more useful to notice the fact that the largest industry for us is automotive and manufacturing. Almost 40% of our revenue comes from automotive and manufacturing, and that means every backer of one or another motorsports team is typically involved in automotive companies and definitely involved in manufacturing companies, they are a target for our software. Again, they use our software on production lines primarily because it's very, very efficient and it's very easy to use and reliable. And so we are working with motorsports, getting marketing value, and then we're working with sponsors. So, it's Nissan is, for example, a customer for us. It's one of our largest customers, but Nissan is going to be a partner of EDAMS. So Sebastian Buemi, which was on stage here, will drive in Nissan EDAMS car, but Nissan is the largest customer. And the amount of money we spent on the EDAMS team and the amount of software they get is tiny in comparison to how much we get from Nissan.
And on that choice of motorsports as an industry, since you've built a wonderful ecosystem that feeds on itself and also provides leads and the marketing value, there's certainly value there. But did that come as a consequence of a deliberate push into the industry, or did you already have that significance?
You have to appreciate that motorsports is a very funny industry where probably 80% of all motorsports revenues and data are all in one motorsport, which is called Formula One. To all the other motorsports combined are much smaller than Formula One. And so Formula One is a huge motorsport. And so now motorsport is a good word, but most of the time people think about drivers. And in Formula One, driver is 5% of success or 10% of success. 90% of success is the car. And so really it's an engineering sport. It's more a competition between engineering teams, a very tight competition between engineering teams. So we mostly think about Formula One as an engineering sport versus motorsport. It's an engineering sport.
I can appreciate that as an engineer myself.
But
fascinating.
of course, it helps us with our brand, but it's also that the flip side of these companies. I mean, let's take what is your favorite soccer club? Do you have any soccer club which you like?
I'm a fan of Milan, LA Galaxy.
Okay, fine.
Go down the
Milan.
list.
Let's say it's Milan. Milan just they just don't have money to pay us, but they need our software.
The demand is there.
They need our software. So what they can give us is a branding. That's it. And so we kind of have no choice. We can eventually they will have money and they will pay us. We think because they will use our software. But for now, what we can get is branding, and we get branding, which is helpful.
So this foreshadows in this conversation about sports more broadly than just motorsports, which is very data driven. Like you said, it's engineers almost competing against each other. Foreshadows a bigger foray for your business into other sectors of sports where data is so valuable.
Yeah, but sports is going to become data is going to become part of every sport. Even today, there is a company called, for example, iceberg.hockey. You can look it up. They do computer vision for hockey. There is a company which will do computer vision for soccer. So sports is going to be all aided by artificial intelligence and by data. Ultimately, it goes towards how do you win in Premier League. You get, for example, in UK, Manchester United has $1 billion budget, and say the club which is last in the ratings has $100 million budget. So how can you maximize $100 million budget and get maximum number of points? Just one second.
Yeah, certainly. We'll end on that note. This is Serguei Beloussov. You're in Zurich, Switzerland. Until next time.